Hi everyone. Happy Monday. I'm Dr. Trina Hinkley from the Expanded Self. I hope you had a fabulous weekend. I managed to get away and do a bit of camping up near the Grampians, which was really beautiful and nice to get some fresh air and out of the city. So this week I'm chatting about fear and the role that fear plays in our lives. Next week I'll chat a little bit about how we might overcome our fear or harness our fear to help us grow, particularly in our courage. So I think fear is something that's really prevalent at the moment, which was why I thought it would be timely to do this as a topic for blog and videos for Facebook. Um, and fear certainly played a huge role in many people's lives, mine included. So I tell a little story in my blog about a time when I was working in a bank, my first job out of school. I was a teller in the bank, and one Tuesday afternoon I was standing next to the head teller in the bank, and a man in a balaclava came rushing through the door. It was about 3:45, so not long before closing time. And he pointed a gun at the head of the man that I was standing next to. Now, I burst out laughing because I thought it was a joke. I don't know why you would play a joke like that in a bank, but anyway, apparently I thought it was a joke and I laughed, and then I realised it wasn't a joke. And I froze and I stood there staring at this man with the gun pointed at the head of the man next to me, terrified that because I was staring at this man with the gun, that he would turn the gun on me and use it on me. And all of these thoughts ran through my head. Eventually, the robber turned around and looked in a different direction without moving the gun, and I sort of ducked down underneath the counter and then stayed frozen there. That experience was so powerful for me that I still remember it in vivid detail, and I remember everything that happened after it for many, many hours into the evening as well, and a number of events in coming weeks that were related to that. And that was more than 30 years ago. So that talks to the power that fear can have on our lives and how much of an impact it can have. So I wanted to dig in a little bit and understand a little bit more about fear. And so basically today I'm sharing what I learned about fear, what it is, and the chemical reaction, a little bit of the chemical reaction that happens in our body when we're afraid, and also what our typical responses are. So fear is referred to as what's called a multi-component response. So basically that just means that lots of our body systems react all at once. So we feel things for a start. So we might feel confusion, and certainly I felt confused when the bank was being robbed. We might feel confusion or discomfort, those kinds of feelings. Our physiology changes, so things like our breathing becomes faster and more shallow, our heart rate increases, our palms become sweaty, and our behaviour is affected. So we'll engage in one of the 5 behaviours that I'll talk about in a little minute. The most commonly known ones are fight or flight. So we either approach the cause of our fear or the trigger for our fear, or we try and back away from it somehow as a rule. Fear is quite functional, and I'm sure many of you are aware of that. It's a mechanism within us to protect us, to save our life. It's part of our evolution. It's part of how we evolved to be able to survive as a species, how any species evolves. It's generally triggered by a threatening situation. Sometimes that threatening situation can be fear of our reputation being damaged, or fear of us being rejected or judged. It can be triggered by a threat to our livelihood or well-being as well. So think, for instance, about speaking to a live audience of 1,000 people, and that triggers quite a lot of fear in a number of people. A chemical reaction takes place when we're afraid, and there's lots of things going on there. So I just want to touch on a couple of them. There are a number of areas in our brains which become highly active when we're afraid. So that includes the hypothalamus, which activates the fight or flight response. So that's a really important one for us to be able to protect defend ourselves, the amygdala, which is responsible for our emotions, and also the sensory cortex. And the role of the sensory cortex is to actually process sensory data. So it will be working at light speed to process what's coming in through all of our senses to make sense of it. And then various other areas of our brain are stimulated in the process. Our bodies release a number of chemicals and hormones, so epinephrine or adrenaline and norepinephrine or noradrenaline, and a bunch of other hormones as well. So there are our stress hormones and our fight or flight hormones. And as I mentioned, we have a number of physiological responses like our heart races, our palms become sweaty, those kinds of things. And interestingly, fear is predicated on hope, on the idea that there is hope that we're going to survive the situation. So if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, or if you think about an animal that's afraid, a deer perhaps that's being chased by a lion, or a gazelle that's being chased by a lion, they run because they're hopeful that they're going to outrun the lion that's chasing them. So I thought that was a really interesting one, that fear is predicated on hope. So maybe there's an opportunity for us to tap into that sense of hope rather than the feeling of fear the next time that we're afraid. So the types of responses that we have, when I grew up, I learned all about fight and flight. And I could see those in animals. Fight obviously is the idea of putting on the boxing gloves and getting ready to defend ourselves or attack whatever is threatening us. And flight obviously is the idea of running away, putting on our running shoes and getting out of there quick smart. Of course, we also have the freeze response. So this is where we literally play dead. Basically, our heart rate slows, we don't move, and we just lie there as though we're dead, or perhaps we stand there as though we're dead and with no movement. So think of a mouse that a cat has caught, and the cat's playing with the mouse. The mouse is still alive, but it's pretending to be dead. It's frozen in the hope that the cat will grow tired of it and leave it alone. And that's basically what I did in the bank. Was I froze, stood there frozen, and then ducked down and froze again. We have the flop response. So this is the total bodily collapse. So this is where perhaps you lose consciousness or you black out, where you're actually not able to remember the events of what happened. And typically this is a pretty rare response, so it wouldn't happen in very many cases. You may lose control of bodily functions, and that might happen with a lack of consciousness as well. And then the final one is fawn, and this is the idea that we might try to make friends with whatever the threat is. So it's not particularly pleasant to think of, but this would be particularly relevant in the situation of being in an abusive relationship or an abusive situation, where we might try to befriend or connect with in some way the person who is the threat to us, in the hope that they'll see us as a human. So there's that hope again, in the hope that they'll see us as a human and therefore have some compassion for us, because humans do have compassion and empathy for each other. So that's basically what I wanted to cover today. It was a little bit about what fear is and what goes on in our bodies when we're afraid, and what our responses or reactions to fear might be. So I hope there was something of interest there to you. I'll pop back on Wednesday and chat a little bit more about fear, primarily about the things that we're afraid of, and then Friday I'll have a little meditation on managing fear. So I hope you have a great couple of days, and I'll see you on Wednesday.